Our speaker, as you all know, is the well-known Guadalajara artist, Paul Fontaine, who has been living in Mexico for many years. He likes the ambience here. He's had painting exhibitions all over the world, however, not only in this area. I guess your latest one was around Lake Chapala in the Ajijic area. Paul also likes playing tennis with his friends at the Guadalajara Sports Club. I'm not in his league yet. He has the most wicked topspin in the game. Paul will speak to us today on understanding Picasso. I hope he does, because I don't. Paul?
I wish you me luck. Can anybody hear me? Oh, can all of you hear me? Well, I was walking downtown the other day and going by Gringo Square, and much to my surprise, I saw Eli. And Eli Garson, I don't know if you know him, he's right over there. And he said, "What are you going to talk about, Paul? I read somewhere in the paper that you're going to give a talk." And I said, "Picasso." "Yeah, I know Picasso, but what's the title?" "Understanding Picasso," I said a little bit defensively. He said, "Oh, put some life into it." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" "What do you mean, put some life into it?" He says, "How about Picasso, phony or genius?" So it sounded all right to me, but I didn't have time to put that title in the paper. So in the question period, you can ask me some questions as to whether or not he was a phony or not. Maybe it'll help explain it. Now, even now that he is gone, controversy still clings to the name Picasso. Lawsuits, suicides, vandalism. Who knows what we'll read in tomorrow's newspapers. Profiles and reviews are still being written about his paintings, his arrogance, his family, publicity no other artist in history has received. Now, to understand Picasso, you have to know Picasso and have a knowledge of his life's work. And believe it or not, one Picasso is not a summary of his work. And when one hears of about $500,000 paid for a painting that he has made that looks like any kid could do it, then you begin to realize that the name itself has a lot of significance. And you're paying for his signature as well as the painting. First, we should investigate his childhood, who his parents were, and how a person of this awesome sophistication should come from such a modest background. Pablo Reyes Picasso, born October 25th, 1881, Plaza de la Merced, Malaga, first child of Maria Picasso Lopez and Don Jose Reyes Blasco, art teacher at the San Telmo School of Arts and Industries. His parent, now two more indulgent people would be hard to find. Picasso's wish was their desire. And if he felt like staying home from school to play, he stayed home. And as Ami Zabates, his secretary, says, he appears to have been born with a pencil in his hand. His father was an artist, and his father's brothers and sisters were amateur painters. An uncle, who was a doctor, was also known for his artistic flights, and as was his paternal grandfather. His grandfather was reputed to have a bad disposition, perhaps because he saw or fancied himself obliged to give up his art calling. Now, in order to keep his family alive, for in Spain at that time, to be an artist was to be nothing. And incidentally, times haven't changed at all, very little anywhere. And this statement is true today, world over. It's a rough racket. The same fate happened to Pablo's uncles, Diego and Salvador, and to one of their sisters. So Pablo's father was the first artist in the family to change a hobby into a profession. So when they had somebody who could really draw and paint, you could realize, I mean, they were treating this as something precious, even from the age of 5 and 6 years old. So with this background and Picasso's talent becoming evident at such an early age, he was permitted to do just as he pleased. So peaceful was the atmosphere that Pablo found himself free to sketch whatever struck his fancy. And when Picasso was 13, in 1895, Don Jose, his father, gave him all his paints and brushes. Am I speaking too fast? No. Now, this is a very important event. At the early age of 13, his father, who was the best artist in town, felt that Pablo had more creative ability than he. And I don't know how his father felt, but I mean, I wouldn't want to give my brushes to my kids. And this is what a foundation for an uncontrollable ego. Picasso entered the art school La Oña in Barcelona, where his father again taught. And at 14, Picasso was accepted in the advanced class in drawing after taking only 1 day to complete the examination. Ordinarily, a whole month would be allotted for this. I'm not giving all this early background to show that in a conventional sense, I'm giving all this background to show that in a conventional sense, he was as clever as the best of geniuses, of history, like Raphael and Rubens and other child prodigies. In the classic sense of standards, he had few peers. Now, in 1897, when 16, he was awarded honorable mention at the Exhibition of Fine Arts in Madrid. And in October, successfully applied to and was accepted for the advanced classes at the Royal Academy in Madrid. Now, at 17, he won medals in Madrid and Malaga for his painting Customs of Aragon. And in 19, he finally went to Paris, and at the gallery, and the gallery owner, Berth Weil, a top-rate dealer, bought 3 sketches. Now, this is quite an honor for a youngster of 19, just out of Spain. And at 20, in 1901, he had his first show at Amboise Voyage, the top modern gallery in Paris. Here he is, he's 20 years old, and already his name is spreading. Now, with this background, one can surmise that very little suffering took place. We always think of him, really, struggling along and nobody wanting his stuff, like Van Gogh and so on, but it wasn't this case at all. This is a completely different story. But one success after another, and from time to time, even money was available. In 1901 was the beginning of his famous blue period. Thin and emaciated clowns, beggars and whores and entertainers were his subject matter. These were his neighbors. Rent was cheap in this neighborhood. And the young artists lived amongst them and used them as models. Picasso's style was becoming known and his fame was spreading fast. Now, in 1906, he discovered Negro art, which ended the Rose period. However, in 1905, he painted a very large painting called Boy Leading a Horse. This was in the Rose period. A truly beautiful painting, now in the Modern Museum in New York. That is, it's beautiful from any point of view. I mean, no matter, anybody can understand this one. And if one wants to enjoy the high points of Picasso's art, one need only go to the Modern Museum in New York. They're all there. Boy Leading a Horse of his early Rose period, and Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which is of the Negro period, Women in White of the Classic period, the innumerable still lifes of the Cubist period, and then the seated bather, which is of his Surrealist period, and then Young Woman with a Looking Glass, and then, of course, the Guernica. First protest painting and probably his greatest. He only made 1 or 2 protest paintings. We always think of him as really fighting for the underdog, but there was only a couple of them. And then Kennedy of the New York Times art critic, called the Guernica the most important painting of the 20th century. Not a most important protest, but a most important painting. So, so I'm giving a little rundown on his early life because This protective atmosphere helped foster a completely uncompromising existence as a painter. Also, it helps explain the courage he possessed to explore areas in art never before attempted. Now, what are these inventions that Picasso's fame rests on? They began very early in his life. I'm not going to discuss those hauntingly beautiful pictures of the Blue Period or his experiences in Holland and their Happy Rose period, or the pictures made under the influence of Ingres, Toulouse-Lautrec, or Cézanne. None of these were new statements. Beautiful paintings and representative of a very personal style, but could not be classified as inventions. Picasso's discovery of Negro art. In the early 1900s, anthropologists in France, England, and Germany were bringing back findings from Africa, Benin sculptures, and other expressions of Negro art. This thirst for the novelty excited all the young folks. And for the first time, as Sir Kenneth Clark stated, a European artist, that's Picasso, treated a human figure not as a heroic or beautiful subject, but as a grotesque object. And this is just a little detail in one corner of this Les Dames d'Avion, which was this big experiment with Negro art. And you can see some of the devices from African art, the olive eyes and the huge hands, all out, in proportions not being seriously accepted, except for the sake of composition and color, and arbitrary color, bright blue on the face, and there it is right there. And this is the pre-Cubist period, or his Negro art period. And when Braque took a look at this, he said, "Oh my God," he says, "I've never seen such a horrible thing." And Picasso put it away for 30 years. It was just hidden away. He didn't show it to anybody. And then Gallatin saw it, and he bought it, and he gave it to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Or they bought it from Gallatin. I don't know which way. Now, this painting is as fresh and modern today as it must have been shocking in 1907. And at this time, the young Picasso, 26 years old, became friendly with Matisse, the wildest of the foes, and with George Braque and André Derain. But together with Braque, we see the first experiments with a truly abstract art. And a good example is in the so-called dressing table in the Wallaby Chrysler collection. Picasso himself confessed to Francois Gillot, this is his second or third or fourth mistress, I can't remember which number, that these, and Picasso explained to her that these pictures were not cubistic. Apollinaire gave this title to them for want of a better description. And this series of paintings were painted purely as design, paintings for the sake of paintings, harmonies and rhythms on one plane. Always said, I would put a circle or a hook in and give the picture a title to let the observer find or imagine a figure. They were simply non-objective paintings. Mondrian and Kandinsky later developed this mode of painting and became their most famous exponents. Needless to say, however, Picasso's first were in 1909, and Mondrian didn't make his first abstract painting until 1911. And we always thought that Mondrian was the first one. Now, on page 66, out of Francois Gillot's biography of Picasso, and I'll read a little paragraph here. I told Pablo I thought nobody could have completely made non-objective paintings better than he. I suppose so, he said. In those polyhedric cubistic portraits I did in tones of white and gray and ochre beginning around 1909, there were references to natural forms, but in the early stages there were practically none. I painted them in afterwards. I call them attributes. At this period, I was doing painting for its own sake. It was really pure painting, and the compositions were done as compositions. It was only towards the end of a portrait that I brought in the attributes. And at a certain moment, I simply put in 3 or 4 black touches, and around these touches became a vest. And then on page 71, I asked him how a painter could work like nature. This is on a little different theme. Well, he said, aside from rhythm, one of the things that strikes us most strongly in nature is the difference of textures. The texture of space, the texture of an object in that space. For instance, a tobacco wrapper, a porcelain vase, both have different textures. And beyond that, the relation of form and color and volume to the question of texture. The purpose of the papier collé. Now there's an example of papier collé where he's got the texture of wood, he's got newsprint, cardboard, and that sort of thing. And this is called a head. This is a portrait, and done in 1914. The purpose of the papier collé was to give the idea that different textures can enter into composition to become the reality in the painting. That is, the textures become the most important part, and not the subject that you think it represents. And this competes with the reality of nature. We try to get rid of trompe d'oeil to find a trompe d'esprit. Now, a trompe d'oeil is making something, for instance, if you did this all with paint and you put in all the little lettering and all that sort of stuff, and it looks so real and it'd be fooling the eyes. But we were trying to go a step beyond that, trying to fool the mind. And that's what trompe d'esprit means. We didn't any longer want to fool the eye. We wanted to fool the mind. A sheet of newspaper was never used in order to make a newspaper. It was used to become a bottle or something like that. Now here's a piece of paper used to continue the round part of a head. Not that it looks like much, but that was the attempt, wasn't it? It was used to become a bottle or something like that. It was never used literally, but always as an element displaced from its habitual meaning into another meaning to produce a shock between the usual definition at the point of departure. Now this is surrealism, where you probably are all familiar with this famous painting done by Dali called The Wet Watch. This is a little tree, and a watch is leaning over a tree, and it looks as though it's drying out there. Well, we never associate a watch as being wet, and this is the shock element that he's talking about here. And this, of course, was done years before Dali ever thought of surrealism. He must have been a youngster at the time. If a piece of paper can become a bottle, that gives us something to think about in connection with both newspapers and bottles. This displaced object has entered a universe of which it was not made, and where it retains in a measure its strangeness. And at this strangeness, what was what we wanted to make people think about, because we were quite aware that our world was becoming very strange and not exactly reassuring. And this, in a way, had a lot to do with the times in which these things were done. And of course, you could still do these things today because the world isn't that orderly. Now we realize that confusing the mind became an obsession with Picasso. And from this period on, in 1909 until his death, of course, surrealism is partly a matter of fooling the mind. In 1925, 16 years later, now here is Picasso doing these surrealist things 16 years before the surrealist movement even started, and so they were glad to accept him amongst the surrealist group, and he was amongst this group who had the first surrealist exhibition. That is an exhibition called Surrealism. And now he participated in the first exhibition of surrealist painting in Paris. Now, I'll give you a little bit on surrealism here from Vision designed by Maholi Nage. Surrealism. In 1921, Tristan Tzada, the leader of the Dadaists, left Switzerland for Paris. He tried to organize Dada amongst his French colleagues. The From this very active group, after several more or less unimportant conflicts, the Surrealist group emerged under a new leader, André Breton. Breton, formerly a psychiatrist, had been interested for a long time in the work of Sigmund Freud, who, in his psychoanalytical studies, showed how subconscious repression, especially of sexual nature, determined feelings and actions of the individual. This emotional force, expressed sometimes by automatic actions such as mispronunciations, misspellings, omissions, lapses, doodlings, became inspirations and source material for surrealist creations. They added a new species to the arsenal of literary expression. Automatic writings, originally it was a psychological experiment made by Breton and Souffin, and as emotional purgations and a kind of self-hypnosis. Well, anyhow, this is what the writers were doing, and the painters thought that they could probably, this gave them a new inspiration for another development. This surrealist movement made its appearance in 1924, the first surrealist manifesto under the name of André Breton was published in Paris. Now, he was in close contact with the spokesman of this movement, that is, Picasso was. And André Breton, Paul Fontaine, Louis Aragon, and Robert Desnoyers. The paintings, and also he was in close contact with Max Ernst and Juan Miro and Man Ray, these were also his circle of friends. However, before this, Picasso was intrigued with the Dada movement, which was started by Tristan Tzadar in 1916. You probably remember the fur-lined teacup. Now, this made all the headlines in the States. I remember that. I must have been about 10 or 12 years old when this fur-lined teacup made the headlines. And this is, of course, another example of intriguing the mind. But Picasso had been doing this even before all these things got so much publicity. Now on 310, the Dadas were influenced by the Futurists. The Futurists were an Italian group, and they were interested in action, motion, and they. I remember there's one, a woman leading a dog is probably the most famous one, and you see about 15 little feet coming. And even today, when cartoonists want to give motion to something, they always put a whole lot of lines in the drawing, and then a whole lot of lines afterwards. And this was the Futurist movement coming out of Italy. They opened up the route for the surprising and embarrassing, and even the nonsensical in art. The Futurists were propagandists of movement, speed, dynamism, rhapsodists of technology. With infantile enthusiasm, they hailed war as a health giver, and merely because it was dynamic and full of movement and speed. Fortunately, not everywhere did the youth believe in this thesis. Some faint idea prevailed amongst a great number of them that there was a lag between the technological accomplishments and the social reality. And the greatest single need of the age was bridging this gap. Indeed, many achievements of this industrial revolution could be praised emphatically if people had not had to pay so dearly for them. And anyhow, this Dadaist movement, and this is what they say: we're not politicians but artists, searching for an expression that would correspond to our demands for a new art. All of us are enemies of the old rationalistic bourgeois art, which we regarded as symptomatic of culture about to crumble with the war. Now, the Dada movements were a complete opposite to the Futurists. They wanted, this whole idea of war had no social reality to it, and it's kind of silly. Now, our art had to be young, and it had to be new. It had to integrate all the experimental tendencies of the Futurists and Cubists. After everything, our art had to be international. Well, we believe in an international of the spirit and not of a different national concept. Well, anyhow, that was the Dadaist movement. Knowing and enjoying the company of these Dadaists and Surrealists reinforced his own youthful nihilistic tendencies. One can sum up Picasso's primary desire in constructing his paintings with one word: impact. For the most part, he accomplished his impact by doing the unexpected. I'm not going to give you a rundown on Picasso's successes, since this paper is really an understanding of his art. And I feel that little understanding of his early life is the key to his art. Now, I'll explain a whole lot about his early life. Now, here's a few words that Picasso said about his early doings. There was just one incident, an embassy dinner, that was a catastrophe, he said. The Poles have always been broad-minded and independent, and it didn't occur to them that anyone would attempt to criticize my paintings for political reasons. At the end of the dinner, when toasts were being proposed, one of the Russian delegation stood up and said he was pleased to see that I had come to the Congress. He went right on to say it was unfortunate that I continued to paint in such a decadent manner, representative of the worst of the bourgeois world. He referred to my impressionist surrealist style. And as soon as he sat down, I stood up and told them I didn't care to be talked to like that from some party hat, and that in any case, their description of me as an impressionist surrealist painter was not very impressive. If he wanted to insult me, at least he should get his terminology straight, and damn me for being the inventor of Cubism. Picasso was proud of this. These first Cubist paintings of his, they were really probably his highlights. I told him that I had been reviled in Germany by the Nazis and in France during the German occupation as a Judeo-Marxist painter and all that kind of talk. Whatever the exact terms, always cropped up at bad moments in history, and came from people nobody had much respect for. Then everybody began to get excited and protest in one direction or the other. The Poles tried to calm down the Soviets by agreeing that perhaps some of my paintings were decadent. But in any case, they said, the Russians shouldn't be allowed to insult their guests. So yeah, this fellow really had a lot of guts. Now they were talking a lot about the Communist Party and why his friends shouldn't join and all that sort of things. Occasionally, Pablo would ask Convile, he was one of the biggest dealers in Paris. And he died recently. He was also in the early 90s. Have you made up your mind to join the Communist Party? This is what Pablo asked Convile. That would make me very happy, you know. The question had a double edge, and Convile knew it. If he said yes, Pablo would have been unhappy, because he would have known that Convile could not have done such a thing with any sincerity. If he had said no, Pablo would have been unhappy also, to have his old friend turn him down flat. Since Convile didn't want to lose out on his paintings, Convile's whole livelihood was dependent on how many pictures Picasso would give each year. It was a very delicate situation when he would go to the Provence and say, I don't have any more beautiful pictures. Have Picasso always say, no, I don't have any. He may have thousands of them. He wouldn't give them. Then it'd be this long discussion, and Picasso raised the prices of everything. And since Convile didn't want to lose out on his paintings, he was generally very careful to make a reply that was neither yes nor no. But one time he answered quite wittily, no, my dear friend, I don't believe I will join the Communist Party today. Because since the death of Stalin and the discovery of all his friends, said Pablo, I see what you're coming to. That gives you an easy out, doesn't it? You're going to claim you're disgusted with Stalin, and that solves everything. Not at all, said Convile. I just came to realize something I never really understood before. That is, Stalin was a pessimist. What are you getting at? Pablo asked him suspiciously. Just that, said Convile. A pessimist. I suppose he must have picked it up in his early years at the seminary when he was studying theology. He developed a kind of Manichaean dualism, apparently. He must have decided, in other words, a doctrine based on optimism. Yet, Stalin gives us the proof of just how false he thought that doctrine was. He was better placed than anyone else to know whether optimism in that matter was possible And he answered with a thumping negative by killing everyone within his reach. Apparently on the grounds that human nature was so bad that there was no other way of settling affairs. Under these conditions, how can you expect an intelligent man to become a communist? And then that was Conway, in case any of us had this difficulty. Now 184, if I can ever find it.
It's right after 183.
I never got to 183. Now he's talking about Miro. I mean, Miro has always been a question mark to most people, particularly his friends. Pablo laughed. If you went on seeing Miro every day for the next 2 years, you would know any more about him than you do now. Like all Catalans, Miro is the most cautious of men. At the height of the Surrealist movement, when the big demonstrations were going on, everyone was supposed to do something scandalous, to throw mud in the collective bourgeois eye. It was considered a major achievement to do something outrageous, right out on the streets, in sight of everyone, and as a result, be arrested and perhaps spend a day or two in jail for having committed an affront to the established order. Sounds like a bunch of kids back then. Everyone was cudgeling his brain for some original way of setting things up in opposition to the reign of the triumphant bourgeois. Some of the groups hit on the idea of having people go out into the street with various kinds of subversive utterances. Robert Denois, for example, was supposed to say, "Bonjour, madame," to a priest down in the subway, within hearing of many people as possible. And Michael Leary, he started up a gallery later to sell Picasso's pictures, whose father or uncle or cousin was an official of the prefecture of police, was assigned to insult policemen until he succeeded in provoking one into arresting him. He got drunk first and started out on his bicycle. When he came across a policeman on duty, he shouted abusive names at him. He was soon taken to a police station. There he kept it up so courageously that he was given a thorough beating and held for 48 hours. Since he's rather frail, and when he came out after his 2 days, he was in terrible shape, but quite a hero. Eluard went around shouting, "Down with the army! Down with France!" in some public square. He got roughed up too, and then dragged away to cool off in jail. Everyone carried out his assignment with exemplary zeal. Miro too was expected to justify his presence in the group in some manner. So what did he do? He went around disclaiming very politely, "Down with the Mediterranean." Now, the Mediterranean is a pretty big place, and with so many countries around its shores that not one of them could take it very much to heart if the Mediterranean was being attacked, and so politely at that. As a result, nobody rose to his defense, and "Down with the Mediterranean" was the only outrage that went unpunished. Everyone else in the group was pretty disgusted with Miro when the results were all in. "Why did you say that?" he was asked. "That doesn't mean anything." "Oh, yes, it does," he said. "The Mediterranean is the cradle of our whole Greco-Roman culture. And when I shouted 'Down with the Mediterranean,' I was saying, down with everything we are today." That's Miro, so you really never get to understand him. Now, what has been Picasso's legacy? In my opinion, Picasso had enormous influence, believe it or not, on cartoonists and caricaturists today. The wild distortions, as in Ralph Cyril, putting both eyes in front view and their nose and ears in profile, all heads and feet with no bodies. And since Picasso, everything goes in the cartoonist world. Now you can see, I mean, this is just a little rough idea. And this is 1911, is one of his earliest abstracts. It's called Kadak, but you don't see any port there. It's a matter of rhythms and lines and one or two simple colors. And another one of his early devices here, that you see on page 1927, is these two-headed figures where the nose is on this side with one eye in common to both of them. You can see, this is one figure and here's another figure. And it's a matter of, once more, of the old surrealist idea of intriguing the mind. And of course here, the enormous influence of Negro art, even as late as 1940, where no eye is put where it's supposed to be, and the breast growing out of the shoulder, under the armpit, and stomach's coming in all directions. Anything at all to stir up a little interest. Epstein, the great English sculptor, was influenced by Picasso's Negro period. I don't know if any of you remember Epstein. He made his pictures used to be in all the Sunday supplements, and he was as shocking as anybody. Yet, you could see Picasso all over his work. And Henry Moore's sculptures are pure Picasso of the Surrealist period. You look at some of these early Picasso paintings, and you can see Henry Moore in them. Picasso's assemblage, that is junk art, in collaboration with Gonzalez, the Spanish dweller, has had enormous influence on American sculptures, even today. Now, I guess I don't have it here. There's another little very famous piece by Picasso. It's two pieces taken out of a bicycle. That is the bicycle seat and the handlebars. And so when you see a bicycle seat and the handlebars, but together, the handlebars become the horns, and the head of the bicycle seat become the head of the bull. And this is a very famous piece. I'm sorry, I made a drawing, but I guess I didn't. It must be still in the car. And Picasso, one might hazard, has given us an entirely new way of seeing. Freedoms never dreamt of 50 years ago are now commonplace. And to see Picasso, one need not look at Picasso. That is, you will see it all around us. Of course, he didn't initiate all art movements common today. But his concept has prepared us to accept new theories for what they're worth. Now, one of the big movements today is called conceptual art, where you go into a gallery and there's nothing on the walls, and there's the artist sitting, and what this artist is thinking about, that's the art. His concepts. He may have fantastic concepts and he describes them to you, and that's the art. Now there's random art, which is also very popular today. And it's art without any interest to either the art or to the public or to the artist. That is just objects picked up and put around. And you're supposed to, I suppose, imagine great things out of it. Then there's kinetic art, moving objects. This was first devised by Calder. And they put little motors on things, and you see all this motion. Some things are quite striking. Kinetic art, to me, has really a lot going for it. And then environmental art, in which the whole rooms is the art, and you're walking in and out. And Carl Schwitters is one of the forerunners of this art here. It's and one of his greatest pieces is called Merzbau. It's a three-dimensional creation to which the spectator wanders in and out. And Carola Gideon Welker described it as being a little world of branching and building where the imagination is free to climb at will. Now there are a lot of people in that art movement right now. At any rate, since Picasso's first public appearances, creations have possessed an inherent capacity to stir up conflict, which now we look for in art shows. He's prepared all of us to expect more in an art show than a pretty picture. We're looking for, when we go to an art show, we want something to stir us up. And composing enigmas, to him, are as valid as composing masterpieces, especially when the enigmas become masterpieces. And this is what most contemporary movements base their thesis on. And Picasso has often said, when his friends and critics were baffled by his work, "You don't understand? Give yourself time. You will." And when Gertrude Stein protested how strange her portrait looked, his reply was, not to worry, that in time she herself would begin to look like her picture. That's it.
We'll have the time to do it. I'd like to start out by telling an experience that I've had in New York. I worked as a lawyer down on Wall Street, and all of a sudden, down in these cavernous areas of Wall Street, in between these buildings, I came across an art class being conducted by a friend of mine, Tom Clancy, who teaches art in New York. And what they were doing was blowing soap bubbles and watching them go up into these spaces. And that was art to them. It was no permanent masterpiece, but apparently random art doesn't need permanence anymore.
Well, random art is art without any interest to the artist. So that's another kind of art. That would be more kinetic. That's
More kinetic, yeah.
That's moving art. And there are probably a lot of people who thought this is quite beautiful because Picasso once more has prepared us to accept these things.
It was beautiful.
Yeah, well.
Get these 50 kids all blowing bubbles up in there. Shaking hands.
It'd make a good painting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Ellen.
The Life with Picasso by Francois Gillot. That was his mistress. And Carlton Lake was the one who... And it's a fantastic book. It really is. And, yeah, I got this here in town. Sure. Libros, you can buy it. Did you want to know what the other book was?
No, I didn't. Well, yes, if you have it.
Well, that you can't get.
Oh.
Okay.
Save yourself some
You?
I wondered if it would be possible for you to say, briefly, what essentially Picasso was after in his work.
Well, what style are you referring to? What period? I mean, Picasso's done,
Well, but in each style, it has seemed to me that he was always aiming towards some
you know
source.
what Picasso says? He says, I'm mostly interested, he says, in paving new paths and new ways of expressing art. It's never been done before. New ways of making pictures. And he says, and I let the others who follow me make them beautiful. But with Picasso, when you're looking at Picasso, you're looking at a man who's striving to make a picture like nobody else has ever made before.
Just to be different.
It isn't just. It's just like Columbus, who came to the United States. You would say, just to be different, he came to the States. I mean, he's the one. Of course, you and I can go back and forth in 4 or 5 hours, and it took this poor guy several months, and of course, we're benefiting by this. And
You never got to the United States.
what? Well, to the New World. How is that? I'm sorry I said that.
Yes, Sasha.
I think that some of us got the wrong impression because you emphasized quite a bit, Paul, that Picasso wanted to shock. He wanted to create an impact.
He said this
that's
himself.
And that's why the question was raised, just to be different. Well, it wasn't just to be different. Of course, he was always looking to put things out of context so that you would see them. Because when they're in context, they just disappear into the background and you're not even aware of them.
Of course.
But I think the important difference that we will see with the effect that Picasso has had on art appreciation is this. Yesterday I went up to Bertha, Lafayette, and right there on that glorietta, there was, local art with these Rococo frames and these very extremely representational things. The flowers, the bouquets, the fruit. They were spurting juice. I mean, they were so realistic you could die, and they were horrible. It's really hard. And when you look at that, and then you look at Picasso, you say, you see, you don't have to be that realistic. You're not trying to convey this on canvas. If you want to be that realistic, damn it, buy the stuff and eat it. You don't have to look at it that way. So, what Picasso did, and what has happened in the other lively arts, is the same thing. You don't have to give a minute description of every little thing. You give the impression, and I mean, that's the cool medium. Then you bring yourself into it, and you can piece out the rest. You get the feeling, the impression, the mood. Now, there are certain things that I wish you had mentioned, Paul, because, I mean, like, for instance, the Vanitas. Remember what he did with Velasquez? And this he did in his own idiom. And when you look at that, the whole thing comes alive. It's an altogether different time. I know that many people here will say, well, you know, I can't feel anything about this. Well, what you were saying, of course, was it's an intellectual thing. And not just to disturb the mind, not necessarily to disturb it, but to make you think. And to make
He
you see it
himself
in a different way.
said he wanted to disturb. He wanted to disturb the mind, and Picasso has opened up such new visions to all of us that no matter what's going on, and it becomes, just as you say, an intellectual experience. And of course, if all our life we've been brought up to appreciate certain types of art, and our friends around like a certain type of thing, naturally we're going to like these things, and if we've never been exposed to another way of looking, perhaps we never will. And so you've got to look at a lot of pictures to really begin to understand that there are other ways of doing things besides, as you described, making something like nature or just copying what's already around us. Because to a lot of us, it's a bore.
Sasha, can we schedule you for a sequel? Lloyd?
Well, if he wanted people to begin to see new ways of doing things, and he's been painting and putting things out since the early 1900s, how does it happen that at this late date, about 75 years later, we still have to have it explained to us? Nobody gets it. Is it successful? Do you think he was successful?
Well, I mean, whenever you go to any art show today, no matter what's being shown, you see the early propaganda of Picasso there. He's been educating the world. A lot of people in the world, a lot of new people being born constantly, and of course we'll have to probably explain these things for the rest of our lives and for eternity. But anyhow, this philosophy, which he started, this new way of looking at, is amongst my group of friends, is quite acceptable.
But it's still relatively new for people.
It's still intriguing.
Sure.
I think you're seeing it even in the clothes women are wearing today. They're taking them and putting jewels on it.
Right. Yeah, that's a shocking element.
That's right. That's the same
Or walking down the street with your hat inside out. I mean, people are going to look at you.
Slim?
Well, being a house painter for the last 50 years, I claim to be an expert on the subject at hand.
Of painting.
Now, there was a guy wrote a book in 1914, a prophecy, and many of the prophecies he set forth have come true. Of course, Dadaism and Pablo were already on the scene. His name was Oswald Spengler, and he takes apart 5 different civilizations, and he says they all go through the same process: birth, maturity, death. And the book is called The Decline of the West. And he says, as we progress down the hill, we've already reached the attack phase. As we go down the hill, we will abandon the classic music, we will abandon the classic art, and we will abandon the philosophers and all the rest of them. And all the artists can do today already been done, only screw it up.
I mean,
This is what he said. Now, I don't know whether it's true or not, actually.
have you ever looked at an exhibition of Negro art out of this young country out of Africa?
Yep,
Well, would you call it decadent?
yep.
Well, and isn't this?
Actually, I believe all the primitives are decadent. I do believe so.
Well, this is the beginning of primitives. Primitives is the beginning. It isn't the end.
I know, you never get to the market if it wasn't
So
decadent.
white is black and black is white.
You know,
You?
for me to go on thinking of writing in the same general vein, I can't remember, he stated one time that to name is to kill, to suggest is to create.
To stimulate.
Yeah, and this applies, I suppose, to this kind of art. What does it suggest?
Well, it's a little bit more than that.
Yes.
We saw a picture in El Prado, Madrid, where it was a mural. And after we looked at the mural, I won't describe the picture, but I was stirred by the scientific mind. They said, turn around, and there was a mirror parallel to the picture. And the picture stepped out in 3 dimensions. And some artists have asked me, that can't be. There's got to be a scientific explanation. I said, I haven't got it. But it was stepped out in 3 dimensions.
Well, if you got Picasso down there, he'd make a mess out of
it. If there are no more comments or questions, yes, Slim, last one.
Yeah, I just have a question. Maybe you're not familiar, but Mario is, I'm sure.
Are you sure, Mario?
I'm positive.
No matter what it is, he's positive.
Just like a lawyer.
You know, in the plaza, the Civic Center Plaza in Chicago, they have this.
Oh, this
grand
great big Picasso, yeah. Oh,
And of
it's
course,
a beauty.
there's a lot of controversy about it. And an artist whom I know was acquainted with Picasso, possibly one of his students. And he said, knowing this guy, he said, this is a big flim flam. He says, I'll give him this because these stupid Midwestern Americans are so stupid they don't know whether it's art or not.
Actually, it wasn't that. This is a little design that he had made many years ago, and this photographer from Chicago asked him if he couldn't give this to Chicago, and which they were going to do something with it, and he was glad to do it. And it wasn't made specifically for Chicago. It was something already previously done, and it was one of his little designs, and it's quite interesting. You know, there's been very little controversy about this thing, and this is public monies that were spent for this, and the Mayor Daley was out there, and he thought it was swell. And I've seen it several times, and it's quite fitting. And this beautiful skyscraper behind is the background. And it's a stimulant, and to think that what a city we normally associate with the epitome of
The hog butchers of the world.
Yeah, right, the hog butchers of the world. And here we find the splendid Picasso sculpture, and to me it's and also, you know, this communist bird that we see everywhere, the dove. Now, he didn't make this for the Communist Party. They wanted something, and amongst all he has always been making pigeons, and they just chose it, and he just gave it to them. He doesn't like to do commissions. In fact, I doubt if he ever did one in his life.
Speaking of his sculpture, I want to mention one that's in the Modern Museum that shows some of his humor. The sculpture of the monkey, where he uses a small car as the monkey's head. It's really terrific. From a distance, it looks just like a monkey's head. You get up close, it's a little toy car. And it's really great.
That's typical.
Yeah. Mario?
Well, the thing about this Picasso monument, question mark, in Chicago
It's
is
monumental.
that I don't think that you have been able to find, or will be able to find, 2 people in the 6 million or 8 million inhabitants of the Chicago metropolitan area that can agree on just exactly what it represents.
Why should they?
Why, it doesn't represent anything at all. It's a monument. A monument is like a chair is a chair.
I can make a living that way.
We still have time. Sasha?
Because we have time, I'd like to have have you explore two more things. What might be considered possibly his best and his worst. You quoted an art critic as saying that Picasso's mural Guernica was the greatest piece of art in the 20th century.
That's what
And
Kennedy of the New York Times said.
all right. Well, it would be awfully good if you could devote a little time to talking about Guernica. And I presume that his worst are the ceramics he did in his later period. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he was debasing his art then. So could you give us a little contrast,
Well,
or if not, at least Guernica?